that where my sermon is?
That's right there. That's all I thought about it. And for me, I just want to add, I have no idea what she's going to say, but the things I've done in life, if I was afraid of failing, I never would have done them. But some of the things I failed very badly at.
You were very good at failing.
I was very good at failing. And that being very good at failing for me was then you just pick yourself up and
Dust
just
yourself off.
dust yourself off and you
And
go,
start all
hey,
over
I can
again.
do it differently.
Yeah, you know what not to do.
Yeah, I know how many ways not to do it. Yeah, it's very interesting. So I'm excited to find out about this daring greatly, because I think that's something we all need to do, and it's available for us. How many of you have ever done something that was pretty daring? And it succeeded. And then sometimes you do something pretty daring, doesn't succeed daring like
Some things you live through it, yay.
Surviving.
Yeah.
Surviving is
Yeah.
pretty good.
Believe me, I'm surprised.
Yep.
So I'm just walking around your talk. I have no idea what you're going to talk about, but I had a woman come in and she said, I am just awful at being married. I said, what do you mean? She says, I don't know how to do it. And I said, love. She said, but nobody tells you how to love. They just tell you to love. And I thought, isn't that true? We don't take classes in how to love. They give classes in how to be sexually proficient. That's not necessarily love. They give you classes on how to be nice, how to be gentle, how to be kind, how to be faithful, how to be, but that word love, you know, I talked to this woman and she said, I've never been in love. And I said, does that feel badly for you? She said, no, I just feel like I'm missing something. Yeah. And, but I said, have you ever jumped into a relationship? She said, no, what if it fails?
Oh.
She's afraid of failing.
She's afraid of failing. It's afraid to give of yourself. And of course, comes from a family where marriages failed, where loving failed. And so for me, when I think about daring greatly, I even think about love. This was one of those.
How many times was your dad married?
My dad was married 5.5 times.
5.5.
Yeah.
I did that 4.5 times, so yeah.
Yeah, he married the same woman twice.
Got it.
So, you know, family comes and kind of was. But he had a type, you know, and his type was young and blonde, and they kept getting younger and blonder. And his last wife was a country western singer who was really young and really blonde, and it was interesting because every other wife besides my mother was younger than I was. And had more hair. Come on up, Chris. You know me, you give me a microphone, I go for hours. Careful of these walls.
Good morning, Chris.
Get over here.
Morning, Chris.
You got it?
Got it.
Good morning, Chris.
This looks a lot like work.
Still,
Oh, what do you
Yeah,
do
one
at
more
work
time.
so you
I'll
don't
free you
feel
back.
uncomfortable?
Good morning, Chris.
I love your hair.
Yeah,
Thank
good.
I do too.
So is afraid of it,
And I'm sorry. So, yes, so the title of my talk today is Failing While Daring Greatly. And just for fun, I left my special juice at home. I left the revised text of my sermon at home. I spent 2 weeks on the CD. It's like download YouTube, MP4A, MP4, MP3 to the CD. It played in my car, which was a really good sign. It doesn't play here and it doesn't play on my CD player. So,
So look at all the daring you've been doing.
yes.
Just wing it.
That's an amazing when you don't even know you're daring.
Yes, that's the failing and the daring. So, yeah, we all have everyday things that don't go right, they don't go the way we think they should. Whose fault is it? Is it my fault? Am I gonna carry it? Maybe it's not. In the case of the not giving Corky the write-up, it actually ended up being a smoother time for her, which I'm really happy for.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
So that worked out. So, when I was a kid, I loved to hear singing, and I loved to sing. I especially loved anthems, national anthems and patriotic songs, holiday songs, great spiritual hymns. Allons enfants de la patrie, le jour de gloire est arrivé. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. Ein feste Burg ist unser Gott. We're going back a ways. Good King Wenceslas looked down on the feast of Stephen. The best one is Love Actually, by the way. So I would allow myself to be filled with the words and the sounds and the ideas of songs, and I would just belt them out, loudly and joyfully. Never on key, mind you, but ecstatically nonetheless. I was so full of me and my connection to God and family and country. And still in grammar school, we were privileged to take music lessons. I ended up taking sequentially piano, flute, and clarinet. I could hardly play a note without squeaking, but I did learn to read music. In 7th grade, I set the instruments aside and I joined the glee club. I was kicked out after just 2 sessions because I sang terribly off-key. My youthful joy and exuberance were of no value when my voice couldn't match the required notes. That was in 1967. Wow. And for 47 years, I never sang another note.
Wow.
Until I came to CCL and they loved me into the choir.
Yes.
It was 5 years ago. And I love them.
And we miss you.
Annie, you may be getting to feel better here. In 1978, I was working on my master's degree in teaching French. I was just 22 years old. I had completed all the coursework, taught high school for a year, and written 3 chapters of my dissertation. But here's the thing. I knew that the dissertation was absolute, pure, unadulterated hogwash. It was unfounded, fabricated, and disingenuous. I could not stomach submitting it, and I couldn't fix it, so I didn't finish it. And I actually simply walked away. That decision to not complete my master's degree has dogged me my entire professional life. It fed the disappointment that my mother had in me, the perception that I never live up to my potential. And even though the honesty and integrity not to go through with it was very, very strong, I have lived with yes, but all my life. So what have I learned? I'm proud of the integrity I showed to not pursue it, even at the tender age of 22. Yet I remain wistful about not having completed it. I have used the information I learned there my whole life. In fact, in 1984, I was conferred a lifetime community college credential. That's a very rare thing, by the way. And that has been my substitution ever since. It doesn't replace the degree, but since the degree is in French, and I've been in manufacturing most of my career, it hasn't necessarily mattered a whole lot of content. Yet I can hear the excuses in that description. I would still like to achieve something to put that ghost to bed. Curiously, one of the reasons I joined the Universal Church of the Master, that's this church's parent church, was that at the time, it offered a bachelor's, a master's, and a doctorate degree through an accredited institution. As soon as I saw that on the website, I jumped in with both feet. Shortly thereafter, however, it was announced that the accrediting institution that UCM was using had itself lost its accreditation. Oh my. So I ended up becoming a reverend instead of a doctor. I'm very happy for that result, to be sure, but it has still left this gaping hole for the academic degree. In 1983, in Palo Alto, I was living on my own, focused on living a dramatic life, exploring my deepest passions. A woman named Arlene Blum came to town from Berkeley. Raise your hand if you know who that is. Arlene Blum had recently published a book, Annapurna, A Woman's Place is on Top. It is the remarkable story of the first U.S. ascent of Annapurna, the 10th highest mountain in the world. The summit is over 8,000 meters, 24,500 feet above sea level. The U.S. team also happened to be an all-woman team, and they made history both in their unique achievement and also in the tragic death of two of the women climbers, Alison Chadwick from the UK and Vera Watson, an IBM engineer working here in San Jose.
Wow.
Once I watched the documentary and read her book, I wanted to go hang out with Arlene Blum. I registered for a trip to climb Mount Shasta, the North Face, a woman-only expedition.
Holy moly.
I was fortunate to have a second job at Eddie Bauer when they still sold mountaineering gear, think REI. So I bought ice axe and crampons, a Gore-Tex jacket, and a down mummy bag. I trained up and down the hills of Foothill College, backpack loaded with several gallons jugs filled with water. The night before the trip, I drove up to the trailhead and slept in the car. The next morning, we all met each other, and together we headed up the mountain. The first day we hiked from 5,000 to 10,000 feet, through forests and over boulders. We finally hit the snow level, made base camp partway up, and went to sleep. At 3:30 the next morning, we awoke, suited up our gear, roped ourselves together, and headed up the glacier. The more experienced climbers would take the route up the left side of the bowl to the summit, 14,180 feet. The lesser experienced of us, 5 in total, would climb the right side to the top of Shastina, 12,329 feet, with Arlene as our leader. So we split up and in 2 directions headed up the glacier. It was an amazing climb. We had to cross deep crevices called Bergschwund, just like you see in the movies. To cross the Bergschwund, aluminum ladders were placed horizontally across the crack where the ice field has torn free from the glacier as its weight pulls it down the slope. We also had to navigate ice falls, a jumbled, chaotic mass of ice, creating vertical obstructions that you have to hoist yourself up and through and over, putting to good use your ice axe and crampons. As we neared the top of the glacier, we could see the other group way across the bowl, a line of 9 women headed straight up the ridge. When we got very close to the top of Shastina, there was no longer any snow or ice on the ground. The sun was hot, and it baked under our feet. I noticed that the rock path we were traversing was all shale, flat and thin. As we rounded a big corner, every step I took sent pieces of this shale rock scraping and sliding down the shoulder of the mountain. It was a very, very long way down. Abruptly, with just a few hundred yards to go to reach the summit, I sat down on a large rock. Quite uncharacteristically, I decided of my own accord to end my summit attempt, literally just yards short of my goal. Another colleague happily sat there with me, grateful for the opportunity to rest, as I recall, and we waited for the 4 others to go up to the top and then come back down to meet us. A mere 45 minutes later, all 6 of us were headed back down the mountain, and we arrived in our base camp just in time for tea. And so we waited for the other team to come down from Shasta Summit proper. Well, it turned out that the other group had reached the summit of Shasta, 14,000 feet, and there had immediately been a blizzard, a whiteout. The leaders were not local, they were from New Zealand, and they were not all that familiar with the mountain and its routes. Thankfully, the group eventually made their way down, slowly and carefully in the dark of night and the blistering cold, down through the ice falls, back across the crevasses, in good shape. For my part, I ended up getting dizzy and nauseous in the middle of the night with altitude sickness. Arlene came to check on me in my tent. It was only then that I admitted to her what I had been keeping secret for months. This was my very first backpacking trip ever.
Oh my gosh.
I had never done anything like it before in my life. I think she may have been upset that I had withheld my inexperience from her as I could have become a much greater liability had I not stopped when I did, up on the shoulder of the mountain. So, I came, I saw, I climbed, I did not summit. I got sick. And yet I felt exhilarated. I also felt a bit like a fraud because I had deceived the leader. I had stayed physically safe, but I had put the team in jeopardy by not telling them how much of a greenhorn I really was. So let's take a look at these 3 stories. Each one speaks of a certain type of failure. The first story, getting kicked out of Glee Club, speaks of failure while pursuing great joy and exuberance and love of life. The failure was instituted by the Glee Club master, due to his assessment of my inability to fit into the box I was supposed to be in. The second story, walking away from completing my master's degree, speaks of failure while pursuing a goal that I had participated in, but I shortchanged myself by my own arrogance and willfulness. I myself created the scenario that I eventually found untenable. And the third story, stopping my ascent, just sort of the summit, speaks of failure which is actually excelling rather dramatically. The proposed measurement of failure is from a wholly external perspective, one which rightly need not have existed, as my very presence on the mountain was extraordinary. Never mind the actual feats of strength or courage or, near the top, discernment. And at this time I'd like to ask Keith to come up and read a quote.
Good morning, Keith.
Good morning, Keith.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. Good
Morning,
morning,
Keith.
Good morning, thank you. Thanks, Chris. Now if I can get this paper open. It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes up short again and again, because there is not effort without error and shortcomings, but who does actually strive to do the deed, who knows with great enthusiasm the great devotion, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. Theodore Roosevelt.
Wow.
So let the critics do their job while you get busy in getting things done, embracing the change, stirring the pot and thinking, ruthlessly reprioritizing, raising the bar, getting better by learning, enjoying what you are doing, being the best of what you can be, thinking possibilities, living each moment to its best. And when I was a kid, I was doing something and I couldn't do it. It didn't seem to be working. And I sat down and told my dad, I'm a failure. He said, Keith, you're not a failure. What you're doing isn't working. Try something else.
Wow.
He said, there's no such thing as failure. There's only not working right. Try something else. So I've come up with, there's no such thing as failure. There's only feedback. On the other hand, if at first you don't succeed, don't try skydiving.
I am the lucky one in here. Okay. So I have one more story and one more act of great daring to share with you. In 2003, after 23 years with one very big company, I got laid off with thousands of other people in the same boat. I had 4 months' notice, and it was not a surprise. So I immediately started taking night classes in real estate. By the time I was laid off, I had also earned my realtor's license, and I set out to change the world. I had a plan: mortgage lending. The rich would always want to buy homes, and the struggling would want to refinance, and I would help them. For 5 years, I pursued my own agenda. I believed in myself, my priorities, and my power. I made up my own ideas in a vacuum about what the world was like. I made no money. Ultimately, I put my family and all my wealth at risk. My biggest problem was that I did not know what I did not know. But I was arrogant about that, and I believed the stories that I was making up, that I wanted to be true. I did not know the signs, I did not see the signs, and I did not believe the signs when they jumped up in my face. That can't happen on my watch, I said. I told myself a story that the universe did not hold to be true. It was a noble idea with woefully poor execution. And in the result, I lost 2 houses and all my savings. I chose not to go the bankruptcy route, but rather to dig myself out with hard work. And I have indeed worked very hard. 11 years on, I'm finally back at the horizon, regrounded and peeking over. And interestingly, I will be laid off on November 8th, 3 weeks from now, and I have no job to land in at the moment, but that's a talk for another day. So what have I learned? Not so much to stop, but rather to become more educated, to practice listening, to have an accountability partner, to measure the risks, understand them, and front-load them in so as not to be taken by surprise. Good risk management is underrated. It's an important skill to have. And what was the cost? Besides the loss of wealth that I had built up over 23 years of excellent employment, first and foremost, the trust of my partner, now my wife. And boy, is that a hard one getting back. Personal, financial self-determination, flexibility, opportunity, peace of mind, trust of myself, and trust in my choices. I am still grieving, and I am still gun-shy. I have not yet healed this wound, nor resolved the grief attending it. As a counselor, however, I have worked diligently to reduce the false self-confidence and the arrogance and the thoughtlessness that accompanied much of my activity in the past. Yet at the same time, the desire to assist others, in part by giving them a fish, and in part by teaching them how to fish, has not abated. I remain driven by the same desires, the same joy and exuberance, the same yearning for internal, not external satisfaction. The more I know about myself, the easier it is to identify what it is that will feed my soul. I have not started a doctoral program yet, but I am taking Italian 1 and Italian 3 concurrently and loving it. My internal emotional landscapes are just as rigorous and demanding and challenging and risky as any physical landscapes, the landscapes of the soul. And in 1998, 15 years and a lifetime after the Shasta climb, that same mountaineer, Arlene Blum from Berkeley, came to my company to give a motivational talk. As we reconnected, she recommended to me some places she thought I might like to visit. I was soon after sent to work in Beijing, China, for 6 weeks. Heading westward toward Europe, I traveled to Kathmandu to spend some time in Nepal and Bhutan in the Himalayas. And once there, I climbed aboard a 12-seater plane, and way above the monsoon cover, in the clearest of cloudless deep blue skies, I overflew Mount Everest.
Yay!
So I want to remind you of Marianne Williamson's now famous quote that I'm sure you all know, probably by heart. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. Okay. So now for my one more great act of daring. And it is so not how I thought it was going to happen. Here we go. So in all of this discussion about the inner landscape, I have been thinking about place. Where are we at? What are we aware of? Where are we going and what is there? Where is home and how do we know when we found it? This Thanksgiving will mark 3 years since my dad, whom I love so much, left this plane. Last Friday would have been his 96th birthday. I think of him often. He was a professor, a traveler, a war hero, and a farmer. I have been blessed to inherit some of his traits, for which I am grateful every day. Many years ago, I heard a song on the radio that captured much of his charm, his wit, his quiet nobility, and his deep humility. I have always associated this song with him, and I offer it to you all today as a prayer of peace, a prayer of home, a prayer of place. Many of you know I've been working to come back from a challenge with my voice. As I make progress in my own journey, I will be singing this song, Daring Greatly, as a duet with its author, Mr. Garrison Keeler of Prairie Home Companion. Music by Antonin Dvorak.
There's nothing. Turn up your volume.
Coffee done, I'll have some. Step outside alone. Look around, set me down on this slab of stone. I know where I am. I know where I am. I am home again. Creatures all, great and small, heavenly love express, love and faithfulness. Let the promise of salvation come by daily observation in this farmyard, Lord, be with. My old dog takes his walk, sniffing every tree. Every smell seems to tell his biography. Chickens dash across the grass, cats patrol the yard, and 7 geese marching east form an honor guard. Let the small trumpet call, ringing to the sky. 3 loud barks. Wake up and arise. right.